Thanks to Cisco for sponsoring our day of podcasting at KubeCon. We had some great conversations. Thanks again to Cisco. You can learn more about Cisco and their microservices platform at mantle.io. That's MANTL.io.
Hello, this is Joab Jackson from the New Stack, and welcome to another episode of the New Stack Makers. Today we're recording at KubeCon, and we have Nishi Davidson from SAP with us. Hello.
Thank you so much. Hi.
And we're very interested in finding out a bit more. SAP is evaluating Kubernetes.
Yes.
And we'd like to find out a bit more about what you're seeing and the potential work that needs to be done. But first, before we get started, what is your title at SAP Labs, or what is your title, and what does SAP Labs do?
Sure. So SAP Labs is a research division in SAP that tries to promote the latest technologies related to infrastructure software, infrastructure hardware, and cloud tools into different lines of businesses at SAP. These are certain SaaS acquisitions that we made, and also to some of our product groups that are selling their enterprise software into cloud environments. So we are a best practices division. We do research, we do prototyping, pilots. We also do some amount of building of software that goes into operationalization of our lines of businesses. My role at SAP is I'm a director there, and I actually represent the Cloud Architecture and Engineering Initiative, primarily focused on containers and cluster management, and that's how we look at Kubernetes as being a cluster management software and orchestration engine for containers that can run any application that's compiled and built for Linux environments.
Nice. Now, I would imagine that, SAP is a mature enterprise software company. You already, have best practices in place. You have, relatively, really well-developed software, but you're also in between two worlds, between the in-house software that you've typically been selling, but you've also done a lot in the cloud space as well.
Yes.
And so I imagine that's part of your job, is to look at the ways of migrating to the cloud and the benefits.
Exactly. And as you rightly said, we've made majority of our revenues come from the enterprise software market, where we've made a mark. And our competition has always been competition or co-optation has always been with Oracle. But in this new world, you obviously have cloud software providers and the so-called SaaS vendors. And so therefore it's changing. And then you have the world of really gigantic cloud providers like Amazon, Google, and Azure. And as these worlds intersect and the primary data centers owned by our enterprise customers moves to the cloud, we have two responsibilities. One is to acquire SaaS companies and make the SaaS proposition available through our data center to customers, as well as to make sure that our software is compatible with the large Google or the large Amazon, cloud providers of the world, whereby our customers can have the flexibility and the choice to choose whatever environment they would like to run in. So yes, we have to keep in mind the entangling world of the cloud, of open source, as well as try to make our enterprise software relevant in every environment.
Nice. All right, so how did Kubernetes get your attention? You had said that you see it primarily as cluster management software.
Yeah. So Frankly speaking, we are used to the world of virtual machines, and we're used to the traditional way of running infrastructure where an orchestration tool from BMC or IBM or vRealize from the VMware stack is traditionally accepted and operated in primary data centers. But over the last 5 to 6 years, we've actually seen a tremendous move in open source. And as I got introduced to Kubernetes, it also became very obvious that there is a clear difference in which Kubernetes is architected. It is based on operating infrastructure as a thing that does not need to be maintained and taken care of as a pet. It's really about letting infrastructure give you what is asked of it and not managing infrastructure as if they're your little babies, which is a sheer waste of time and energy. And it's a different architectural concept altogether. You're really bothered about what you want from the infrastructure, not how the infrastructure provides it to you. And Kubernetes adds a layer of intelligence into the infrastructure that makes an application or a software engineer's job really easy, because as a software engineer and as SAP, I only care about my enterprise software running really well. I don't necessarily care about how the infrastructure is designed. So Kubernetes is a modern, matured method of using software to automate your infrastructure and to not deal with your infrastructure as individual pets or babies, rather as herds of pets, or rather herds of cattle that are required to meet your application needs. And that's why I think it's a extremely mature software, and it should be the direction in which all enterprises go in the future.
Nice. All right, so how do you when you test it or when you demo Kubernetes, what's the process? Do you set it up across lots of clusters, or how are you kicking the tires, so to speak?
Yeah, sure. So in SAP, a lot of groups are trying to work with Kubernetes. They're also working with other technologies like HashiCorp's portfolio and Mesosphere. Docker by default remains the container platform that everyone is using. We started this pilot project 8 months back, and we have evaluated Kubernetes versus Mesosphere. And our specific line of business that we're working with chose to evaluate Kubernetes further. And in order to help the company with its evaluation, our group as a labs team has created an automation tool that brings up the entire Kubernetes cluster along with CoreOS, Docker, Canal, which is a combination of the SDN solution and the firewall, as well as HA proxy, along with monitoring and logging tools, all ready-made and ready to go using one single tool. And that's what we demoed in the conference. We basically showed that the tool can run in any enterprise data center. It can also run on Amazon. It can also run on Google. And basically what that does is it creates the base level for you to start deploying containers and start testing your applications on top of it. It would not have been possible if there was no support from the open source community and if open source wasn't alive. And the fact of the matter is, Google is not doing this for profit. They're doing it because it's the right thing to do. And we started this journey because of the open source support from CoreOS and Google. And we believe that the community support is so strong that everything will move in the right direction towards Kubernetes, and that ultimately the cloud will be accessible to everyone. And what we should be focusing on is containerization of the application, because that's where SAP's challenge will be. That's where any enterprise wanting to run their application on Kubernetes challenge will be.
Excellent. And so this particular package, pre-integrated package, if you will, so now this would be available to the different lines of business within SAP?
Yeah, and we're interested in open sourcing it and also contributing it back to
nice.
Kubernetes. So anybody in the enterprise can use it, and it's a simple automation that we've built, and we're willing to have any best practices that other companies might want to contribute to. And yeah, I mean, it moves the ball towards not worrying about bringing Kubernetes up. It's already up and running, and then you think about Dockerizing your application. So yes, the answer is we would open source it.
Well, I mean, for SAP specifically, I know I used to cover the U.S. military, and one of the things the Defense Department would do is they would have a number of good technologies, and they would basically field them, and whichever one would take over, that would be the dominant one. Is it still possible to use mesos within SAP, depending on
I'm
business?
sure. I'm sure it's possible. And there is a group that's working with HashiCorp, and there is a group that's working with open source Mesos. So yes, Mesosphere is definitely a strong contender. But we have to see how many real live cases are available all across the company. It's about majority, and ultimately we can't dictate who does what. We can share our best practices, and maybe certain environments like IoT, where there is a higher propensity to running Spark and distributed applications, there people will go the Mesosphere direction. And I would completely understand that, because that makes sense. And some people might also say that Mesosphere is a ready-made built product that takes one day to deploy, whereas Kubernetes takes a while to understand and deploy. It's a more difficult architecture, and therefore I want Mesosphere. I understand that. I want Kubernetes, and I know the reason why the developers I work with want Kubernetes is because even though it takes you a while to understand the design and bring it into production, what that ultimately gives you is clarity in terms of what's happening in the system, and therefore you can debug very easily. And sometimes in production, what's really important is the ability to debug so that you can face any scenario that's ongoing. So there are clear differences between, there are more business drivers, and there's also this belief that the community ultimately chooses the one that is the best. So the community will be able to decide and offer us guidance. But to your point, yes, I completely expect that the company would have a distributed strategy. It is the right way to approach the problem. But then there's also majority play.
Terrific. And your market audience, again, within SAP, are they primarily developers, or is this something that the operations team is offering to developers, or are you also pitching it to the admins as well?
Actually, our audience are both dev teams as well as operations teams.
Okay.
Their intents are different. So the dev team has the majority of the work in containerizing the application, because it's their application that's going to run inside the container, without which nothing happens. It's also the operations team headache to make sure that all the tools that allow them to debug are well integrated and supported, and that they have the right training in order to run Kubernetes in a production-ready manner. And those are challenges that we have to overcome going forward on both fronts. But ultimately, both dev and ops teams are engineers who understand the benefit of sort of having one image that is the control point for every application, having a view that you're not spreading the operating system with your config files that cannot be replicated. They understand the pain points, and ultimately, if you talk to an engineer who really works with systems, they will forget which team they belong to. They will choose the right thing that allows them to have a stable, scalable, easily functional operating environment. And we work with both sides, and both sides show tremendous interest in moving forward with this.
Excellent. Well, you've made the case for Kubernetes. It sounds like a very strong case. But at this point, as the technology as it is currently developed, are there things that, are there features or things that you wish would be improved, especially, given that SAP is already it's like a mature ecosystem? Is there still work that needs to be done with Kubernetes?
Oh yeah, there's a lot of work that needs to be done.
Like what?
So for example, so there are technical aspects, there are also business aspects. I think the cloud-based pricing and, we are trying to use the cloud, and the consumption-based modeling is very new to the purchasing environment of ours. Also, from a Kubernetes product standpoint, even if it's open source, the fact of the matter is enterprises always worry about support, and there is no clear direction where you could get support from. Yes, I know Core OS can give you support, and professional services there can give you support. Google also has a lot of partnership with SIs, and HP or other companies can give you support, but that's not clearly advertised. That's one problem. Also, we don't really clearly see the production use cases. It might be early on, but I believe that the Kubernetes team has to put in more effort in terms of production-ready use cases that are out there, because we know that Mesosphere has more production-ready use cases compared to Kubernetes. So it affects them in terms of the perception with regard to executive teams, and it makes our job harder. So that's one feedback where the product team has to do some more work in terms of, or sales, I don't know who does the work, but bring those case studies out and encourage more projects with companies like SAP or Oracle, where enterprise applications can truly be containerized and prioritized towards their move to Kubernetes. From a technical point, I have many things that need to be improved in general, like the storage story has to be tightened up, the load balancing story has to be tightened up. Every enterprise uses F5, and they have to have a story integrating with F5 just out of the box. It's important and it's necessary, In the security with SE Linux is a little difficult to maneuver because it's really hard, and making it easy would actually help engineers spread the concept of security inside the organization. And monitoring, logging is all fine, we can figure that out, that's not a big deal. But yeah, the three big things are storage, load balancing, and integration with F5 would be priority as far as I'm concerned, and security.
Wow, excellent. Now, to flip the question a bit, for other enterprise and infrastructure software companies out there who are looking at Kubernetes, do you have any lessons learned, any things you could share, like, oh, well, this is what we learned, or you might want to watch out for this, that sort of thing?
Sure. So I think for Kubernetes, it's a very different architecture. It's very different from what you did in the VM world or in your traditional orchestration world. You have to recognize and understand that really well. It's easy to say microservices. It's another thing to really understand what's going on here. And so differentiating between the architecture and being clear about it is very important. The architecture is built for stateless environments. And so you have to be mindful of statefulness, as in how do you operate your NFS or SCSI storage is an important question. I would really encourage people to look at the open source tool that we are going to publish, hopefully we'll publish soon, and use it, because it gives you one simple way to work with Kubernetes that we've already tested in our environment. Use it and give us feedback, and it would help you moving forward. I also think that it's a huge challenge to containerize your application, but the faster you move, the better it would become in terms of moving away from traditional legacy environments that actually are super expensive. You don't even have to change hardware, and your software costs can be reduced so much. It's unbelievable.
Nice.
Yeah. So I would think that people should take containerization seriously, try out our open source tool, because it usually comes down to DNS and proxy and the mess around it, and we figured out a way to maneuver through it. It's simple.
Would you call this a framework or even a platform that you'll be releasing, or?
It's just a simple tool. It's a tool that brings up CoreOS-based architecture, Kubernetes architecture, end-to-end, from your kernel level all the way to SDN firewall, along with monitoring and logging, using just one tool. We've just automated it, and you can run it on multiple clusters. One cluster, you can run it at Amazon and Google. You can do whatever you want to. And you can even take it and customize it for Red Hat if you'd like. But, we've done it for enterprise, for the common problems that an enterprise would have, because we tried to use another tool called Cargo and KubeSpray, and it was really hard to customize it for the enterprise, which is built a little differently. And so I would say try it out, give us some feedback, and remember that you have to design for stateful applications, and remember that you have to put a lot of effort in Dockerization, and it's not going to be easy, but once you're done, the cost reduction is going to be tremendous.
Nice. All right, well, definitely let us know when that tool is released. We'll let our readers know.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Now, something I'm kind of curious about, and you already alluded to this, has open source software, open source community, the process, has it changed the procurement process for your customers or even for SAP itself?
Yeah. So one of our team objectives has also been to release HANA in the cloud, in Amazon Cloud and in Alibaba Cloud, and we've been releasing it. So one of my colleagues has been putting in a lot of effort in terms of changing the purchasing process through that and making sure that customers can consume HANA from the cloud. It's a completely new way of thinking. The other example I can give you is we just tried to build an account with GCP, and I just set up that account, and I had to understand that people who had set up accounts with GCP, other groups in SAP, had a purchase order which was absolutely different and caused them a lot of headache, because in the older days you would have line items for hardware and software, whereas in the cloud it's based on consumption. Where do you put it? And it's really difficult for financial audit systems to understand that, and for our purchasing department to follow suit. And so it becomes a headache for anyone owning the account to somehow split the bill into line item A, line item B, line item C. And it's like, no, it doesn't work that way. It's based on how much you consume. So forget about everything. It just have to be one line item. So we're dealing with all that and trying to bring that back home. But in general, I think when you think of Kubernetes or any technology like that you're using in your internal cloud in order to serve SaaS customers, it's mostly about cost reduction. And it's mostly about infrastructure engineers having an easy time, not trying to spend hours and hours debugging stuff that they don't want to deal with. And so an automation layer like Kubernetes, and it is like artificial intelligence for infrastructure, and I think of it that way, and it actually frees up a lot of engineering cycle for people to invest their time in what really matters, which is the application. So those are I don't know if I answered your question.
Excellent.
But yeah.
Oh, yes. Terrific. And finally, we're always curious about what other sorts of technologies are you looking at the lab? Just generally speaking, what's out there that we should start to keep our eye on?
Well, I think Mesosphere is a very strong contender, definitely. And like I said, they might be used in many environments where distributed computing, Spark, analytics are important. HashiCorp has some interest from the Nomad and Console and Terraform portfolio. But I do think that ultimately Kubernetes will win, and this is my view, not anybody else's view. Not the official SAP view. We want to be diverse, and we will be diverse, but I can only say from the developer standpoint, the interest is very high in Kubernetes, and we will continue to make whatever progress we can as a team.
All right, terrific. Well, Nishi, thank you so much for taking time to get us up to speed on what's happening in SAP, and we'll watch your progress as you start to use Kubernetes some more.
Thank you so much. My pleasure.
All right.
Thanks to Cisco for sponsoring our day of podcasting at KubeCon. We had some great conversations. Thanks again to Cisco. You can learn more about Cisco and their microservices platform at mantle.io. That's MANTL.io.